In 334 BC, Alexander, 21-year-old ruler of the small Greek kingdom of Macedonia, led an invasion of the vast Persian Empire. It seemed impossible odds, but thanks to Greek military dominance and Alexander's fearless leadership, he won two great battles against the Persians, at the river Granicus and at Issus. Having subdued Persian lands west of the Euphrates River, he now headed east into the empire's heartlands, seeking a final showdown with the Persian king, Darius III. It's September of the year 331 BC. Both armies finally met on the vast open field near the village of Gaugamela in a final clash between two of the biggest powers of classical antiquity. After the successful subjugation of Tyre and Gaza, the Macedonian army took some time to regenerate in the rich valley of the Nile. The Egyptian satrap didn't try to oppose Alexander, as the Macedonian was seen as a liberator rather than an invader, since Egypt wasn't the most loyal of Persian provinces. After the crushing defeat near Issus, Persian King Darius changed his approach and tried to stop Alexander's extraordinary conquest by using diplomacy. Yet the Macedonian king refused Darius's increasingly generous terms thrice, and with winter passing by, he started to draw the plans for the upcoming Babylonian campaign. With all preparations completed, the refreshed and decently supplied Macedonian force marched out back to Phoenicia in the beginning of April, heading to the inland of the Persian Empire. As his troops were about to cross the Tigris River, he received scout reports that Persian King Darius had gathered another huge army and was preparing for a decisive encounter with the Macedonians. It's worth noting that Alexander paid significant attention to the often overlooked logistical part of his conquests. Maintaining such a considerable force in excellent shape for many years far away from home required exceptional planning and stellar management. For as long as it was possible, the Macedonian army stuck to the coast and utilized the fleet to take care of provisions. Darius was well informed of the Greek movement, and by the time Alexander crossed the Euphrates, the new Persian army was being assembled. The King of Kings expected the Macedonians to march along the river, straight to Babylon, and decided to use scorched earth tactics by ordering the plunder of the Euphrates Valley. Thriving cities lying close to the river were decently defended, making supply gathering quite challenging, so Alexander chose a northern route instead, which although longer had rural settlements that offered easy access to food and water. Upon hearing the unexpected news, Darius instantly departed Babylon heading north, along the east bank of the Tigris River. He appointed a strong mounted unit under Macedonia, governor of Babylon, to guard the northern crossings of the Tigris and plunder its east bank to hinder the Macedonian march. But Macedonia failed to challenge the Greeks during the crossing, and in the middle of September, Alexander reached the east side of the river. Darius knew that the encounter was close, so he started to seek a suitable place for the upcoming battle. He set up camp on a wide plain near the village of Gaugamela and began preparations. In the meantime, Alexander's troops caught a Persian scouting party and found out that Darius was camping 30 kilometers to the east. The Macedonian king quickly dispatched his own scouts and advanced towards the enemy. Camp was set behind a hill about 10 kilometers away from the presumed battlefield, and after a few days of rest, on the last days of September, Alexander departed towards the Persian positions. Receiving news that a great Persian army led by Darius had assembled at Gaugamela, near modern Mosul in Iraq, he made straight for it. This was Darius's last chance to stop Alexander, and Alexander's chance to smash Persian power once and for all. Even though he was highly prepared, Darius was under constant threat of sudden Greek attack, even at night, so his troops had to maintain readiness for battle. Of course, Darius had superior numbers, plenty of solid cavalry and suitable terrain, but his army could do nothing but wait for the Macedonians to make the first move, as storming the ridge was not a viable option. The sun slowly set on the horizon, while Alexander discussed the upcoming battle with his officers. It is said that his second-in-command, Parmenion, advised a night attack in order to catch Persians off guard, but Alexander turned down this idea as too risky. The Macedonian command then agreed to attack the next day, in the morning. The night passed by, and the first sun rays lit up the battlefield. It was the 1st of October. The Persian army was already in battle formations, as they spent the whole night waiting for the Macedonian attack, which never came. Darius efficiently used the manpower of his vast empire. Up to 100,000 men were gathered to fight for their king. 10,000 of the professional immortal infantry, together with a few thousand Greek mercenaries, formed the core of the Persian center. But the real power of Darius's army was positioned on the flanks. More than 30,000 fine cavalrymen from various Persian satrapies posed a serious threat, especially on such a wide and level battlefield. Darius also had a few hundred Indian scythed chariots, and even 15 elephants, though these animals probably didn't take part in the battle. The rest of his army was formed by various infantry units gathered from tribes inhabiting the Achaemenid Empire, though their battle potential was questionable. Due to the size of Persian army, the command was split between Darius and his trusted generals, Macedonia and Bessus. On the other hand, oversleeping Alexander finally awoke, and the refreshed Macedonian army abandoned their position and began their deployment. 40,000 infantrymen and a 7,000-strong cavalry detachment formed a slanted battle line, with the right flank facing the front of the Persian center. To avoid possible encirclement, both flanks were sufficiently reinforced and slightly curved backwards. The Macedonian center was occupied by a disciplined Sarissa phalanx, supported by solid hypaspist units. Cavalry was split between both flanks, Thessalian units on the left and companion cavalry on the right. The second line was occupied by Thracian and Illyrian infantry. Just like in previous battles, the command was split between Alexander and Parmenion. To achieve a flanking advantage, the Macedonian king started to move his line right, but Darius immediately countered by stretching his left flank and matched the opponent's movement. Darius had the battlefield leveled and cleared off any obstacles for more effective chariot use, which is why he wanted to prevent the Macedonians from leaving the prepared ground. The battle began when Alexander led his wing out to the right, a move that took the Persians by surprise. Could Alexander really be trying to encircle their huge army? The Persians mirrored his movement, taking troops away from their center to outflank Alexander and prevent him leaving the area they'd cleared for the Persian chariots. But Alexander's unusual maneuver was a trap to entice the Persians to weaken their center. When he saw that it had worked, he ordered his Greek cavalry to charge to keep the Persians fixed in position. A giant cavalry battle developed on the right wing. But as time passed, Macedonian cavalry prevailed and routed some of the Persian units, though suffering serious damage. Seeing the trouble on his left, Darius sent all of his scythed chariots to storm the Greek center. Yet this attack wasn't particularly successful, as defenders opened their ranks and allowed attackers to ride through the line, raining javelins on them at the same time. Following the chariots, the Persian right flank led by Macedonia stormed Parmenion's side, killing many Greeks in the process and forcing the Macedonian commander to give ground. Parmenion was in serious trouble, being outnumbered and partially enveloped. But it wasn't the first time he was forced to fight at unfavorable odds. His flank fought bravely and somehow endured the Persian push, though at high cost. It was at this point that Darius noticed that Alexander was moving his flank to the right while Parmenion stayed on the left, creating a gap in the Macedonian center. The Persian king saw this as a weak point and impulsively sent his immortal units to exploit the opening. But this was bait. Doing so exposed Darius's own center. Alexander had waited for such an opportunity. He swiftly moved companion cavalry supported by the remaining units of his flank and struck the Persian center, right where Darius's exposed royal guard stood. Despite the support of the second-line units, the impetus of the Macedonian charge quickly broke the Persian line. The sudden ferocity of Alexander's assault threw the Persians into panic. The center of the army broke and ran, King Darius himself leading the rout. But Alexander's left wing was in serious trouble. Parmenion, facing a huge onslaught by Persian cavalry, was virtually surrounded. Indian and Scythian horsemen had even ridden through a gap in the Greek line. But rather than wheeling and attacking the Greeks from behind, they'd carried straight on to loot their camp. Parmenion sent a desperate appeal to Alexander for help. The king abandoned his pursuit of Darius, regrouped, and charged the Persian right wing. It was the hardest and bloodiest fighting of the battle, claiming the lives of 60 of Alexander's companions. Finally, as news of Darius's flight spread across the battlefield, the last Persian horseman turned and fled. The Battle of Gaugamela was a stunning and complete victory for Alexander. According to ancient sources, he lost just a few hundred men, while the Persians lost thousands. Although Darius managed to escape yet again, complicating Alexander's political plans to crown himself as the king of Persia, the military power of the Achaemenid Empire was crippled. Alexander had routed Darius's great army, and now the road to Babylon, the empire's main capital, lay open. The Macedonian king entered the great city in triumph, recognized by Persian officials as its new rightful ruler. At the city of Susa, Alexander ceremonially took his seat upon the royal throne of Persia. In the Zagros Mountains, at a pass known as the Persian Gates, a courageous Persian force held up Alexander's army for a month. The Greeks eventually found a mountain path that bypassed their position, allowing them to encircle and wipe out the defenders. In early 330 BC, Alexander reached Persepolis, the empire's ceremonial capital. Alexander wanted to appear as a liberator to the Persians, as a legitimate successor to King Darius, but now he ordered Persepolis to be pillaged and burnt, retribution for the Persian invasion of Greece and the burning of Athens' sacred temples in 480 BC. Alexander now headed north into Media, where Darius had taken refuge in the royal city of Ecbatana. Alexander was determined to capture Darius, but the fugitive king fled east in the hope of raising a new army in the provinces of Parthia, Bactria, and Sogdia. It was not to be. As Alexander closed in, the Persian king was murdered by one of his own governors, Bessus, who then proclaimed himself the empire's new ruler. Alexander gave orders for Darius to be buried in the royal tombs of Persepolis alongside his ancestors. Then he paused to organize his vast new empire. Alexander appointed viceroys to rule the provinces on his behalf, keeping several Persians, who had sworn loyalty, in their posts. He also allowed Greek troops who wished to return home. Then he resumed his march east. His main goal was to find and kill the usurper Bessus, subjugate the empire's eastern provinces, and reach the far edge of the world.